Hello, 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 everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome back. We're going to be reading the second part of 3 parts in Chapter 11 in Beyond Religion by the Dalai Lama. So the chapter the part that I just read previous to this video for Chapter 11 is talking about some of the practices, preparing for the practices of meditation, because we're talking about meditation as mental cultivation. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the actual practices that the Dalai Lama is going to share. And I did break them up into 3 separate parts because the Dalai Lama goes into great detail when it comes to preparing to practice and some of the things that may get in the way of preparing for that practice, like procrastination, not feeling like you can clear your mind long enough, and giving up. So now we're going to talk about formal practices, the actual recommendations and suggestions that he has for us. And then in the last video, we will read about some of the roadblocks that we may find in our practice and ways to overcome those. And I think he might touch on ways to overcome those in the practices as well, but he will focus on them. I'm so sorry about my hair. It's wash day, but I really, really wanted to make this video. So anyways, he'll talk a little bit probably about the roadblocks in here as well, but mainly focusing on the practice itself. All right. So let me make sure that I'm starting on the right section here. Okay. Some formal practices. Focused attention. So here's the first one. A more formal meditation practice is the cultivation of sustained attention through single-pointed concentration. Here, you choose an object as the focus of your attention. It may be a flower, a painting, or simply an orb of light. Or for a religious practitioner, a sacred object like a crucifix or an image of a Buddha. Although when you begin, it may be helpful to have the actual object in front of you as an aid, ultimately the physical thing is not the focus of your attention. Instead, once you have chosen your object, try to cultivate a mental image of it. And when you are quite familiar with the image, you fix it in your mind's eye. This mental image is the object of what serves as the anchor for your meditation. Having relaxed and settled your mind, try to maintain your focus on the object. Visualize it about 4 feet in front of you and at the level of your eyebrows. Imagine the object to be approximately 2 inches in height and radiating light, so that the image is bright and clear. Also, try to conceive of it as being heavy. This heaviness has the effect of preventing excitement, while the object's brightness prevents the onset of laxity. So when you make it brighter than anything else, everything else fades away, and it stays bright and clear. It is best when engaging in this type of meditation not to shut the eyes, but to keep them slightly open, looking downwards. Sometimes they may close of their own accord, and that is all right. But the important thing is that they should be neither tightly closed nor wide open. I might also mention here that for people who, like me, normally wear glasses, taking them off for meditating is not always a good idea. Although without our glasses, there is less danger of visual distraction, we may, owing to the loss of visual clarity, more easily experience laxity or dullness. This in turn can lead to our practice taking the form of an undirected reverie. If this happens, one helpful countermeasure is to think of something agreeable, something that makes you feel joyful. Another is to think of something sobering, even something that makes you feel a little sad. Or you may imagine looking down from a mountaintop where you have an unimpeded view in every direction. If you start to suffer the opposite problem, being distracted by something you see, you need to try to withdraw the mind from the eyes. Sitting in front of a blank wall can be helpful in such circumstances. When the object you are visualizing is stable in your mind's eye, perhaps after many weeks or months of persistent practice, you now try to inspect the mind itself as it holds the object in view. Here you are trying to focus the mind, but at the same time to inspect it, as from a corner, to ensure that you are not inadvertently letting it become too relaxed. When your mind becomes too relaxed, sleep may not be far off. But when you succeed in generating a strong and clear mental image, you can start to familiarize yourself with the sort of focus that in ordinary life you may only experience when attempting to solve a particularly challenging mental problem. The idea here is that when you have learned to really focus the mind, then rather in the same way that water is channeled through a hydroelectric plane to generate the great force required to drive the turbines, you can use the whole force of your mind to focus on qualities such as compassion, patience, tolerance, and forgiveness. Even after you achieve some ability to maintain focus, inevitably you will find yourself losing attention from time to time as your mind wanders away from your object, either because of external events or because of internal thought processes. When you notice that your mind has wandered away, consciously recognize this and gently bring it back to the object. If necessary, every now and then, refresh your visualization of the object so that your image of it regains its clarity. Two qualities are essential in this kind of meditation: mental clarity and stability. Mental clarity assists you in maintaining your focus. Stability assists you in assuring clarity by monitoring whether or not your attention remains vibrant. To help ensure the continued presence of these two qualities, you need to develop and then to apply two important faculties, those pertaining to mindfulness and introspective awareness. It is through constant application of these two faculties that you can gradually learn to train your focus so that you can become capable of sustaining your attention for a prolonged period of time. To summarize then, in a typical formal session, we begin by settling our mind through breathing. We then choose our object of meditation and focus our attention on it, now and then monitoring whether our attention has been distracted. When we notice our mind wandering, we gently bring it back to our object of meditation and continue. Finally, when we wish to end our session, we can do some deep breathing exercises once again so that we finish in a relaxed state of mind. Now we have present moment awareness. Let me check and see here what I have left for you as far as the exercises go. Okay. With your mind quite relaxed through some form of breathing exercise, another useful practice is to try to rest your mind in, as it were, its natural state of basic awareness, or what we can call present moment awareness. When you begin, it is important to set a forceful intention not to allow your mind to be swept away by thoughts of what might happen in the future or recollections of things that have happened in the past. Instead, establish the attention to place your mind simply on the present moment and to keep it there as long as possible. When undertaking this practice, it is a good idea to sit, if possible, facing a wall that has no striking color or pattern. Then, after several deep breaths, you simply rest the mind and start to observe it. This is actually quite a difficult thing to do at first. In our everyday life, our mental world is dominated by object-oriented states, either in the form of sensory experiences or in the form of thoughts, memories, and ideas. Very rarely do we experience a state that is not tied to specific content, but simply rests in the mind's natural state of awareness. So when you initially engage in this meditation, inevitably you will find that your mind wanders off. Thoughts and images float through your conscious awareness, or a memory pops up of no apparent reason. When this happens, do not get caught up in the energy of these thoughts and images by trying to suppress or reinforce them. Simply observe them and let them go, as if they are clouds appearing in the sky and fading from view, or bubbles arising and dissolving back into water. Over time, you will begin to catch glimpses of your mind's basic state of awareness, or of what could be called its mere luminosity. As you proceed in this way, every now and then you will come to experience short intervals of what feels like an absence or a vacuum, when your mind has no particular content. Your first successes in this will only be fleeting. But with persistence over a long period, what begins as a glimpse can gradually be extended, And you can start to understand that the mind is like a mirror or clear water, in which images appear and disappear without affecting the medium in which they appear. One important benefit of this practice is the skill you gain of being able to observe your thoughts without being drawn into them. Like a detached onlooker watching a spectacle, you will learn how to see your thoughts for what they are, namely constructs of your mind. So many of our problems arise because in our naive and untrained state, we confuse our thoughts with actual reality. We seize on the content of our thoughts as real and build our entire perception and response to reality on it. In so doing, we tie ourselves ever tighter into a world that is essentially our own creation and become trapped in it, like a length of rope entangled in its own knots. Training in compassion and loving kindness. All right. Another very beneficial class of practices involves cultivating positive mental qualities, such as compassion and loving kindness. These types of exercises make use of deliberate thought processes. Once again, we begin with a preliminary breathing exercise to relax and settle the mind. Only after that preparation do we begin the actual practice. These exercises are particularly useful for occasions when you are struggling with your attitude or feelings toward another person with whom you have difficulty. First, bring that person into your mind, conjuring up a vivid image so that you almost feel his or her presence. Next, start to contemplate the fact that he or she also has hopes and dreams, feels joy when things go well, and feels sadness when they do not. In this case, there is not an iota of difference between the other person and yourself. Just like you, this person wishes for happiness and does not want suffering. Recognizing this shared fundamental aspiration, try to feel connected with the person and cultivate the wish that he or she achieve happiness. It may be helpful if you silently repeat the wish in words, saying something like, "May you be free of suffering and its causes. May you attain happiness and peace." Then rest your mind in this state of compassion. Of the two types of mental cultivation practice mentioned earlier, discursive and absorptive, this way of cultivating compassion primarily involves a discursive process. But every now and then, it is also good to rest the mind in a state of absorption, somewhat in the fashion of bringing home a concluding point in the course of an argument. Since I have already discussed the topic of compassion at some length, I shall not elaborate further here. Many of the points outlined earlier can be brought into your deliberate cultivation of compassion. And this combination of methods of discursive mental training interspersed with absorptive mental training is equally useful in the cultivation of other inner qualities, such as patience or forbearance. Cultivating equanimity. In referring to the state of equanimity, it is important not to confuse this with indifference. Rather, equanimity is a state of mind where one relates to others in a way that is free of prejudice rooted in the afflictions of excessive attraction or aversion. There are two principal forms of equanimity practice. One is likened to leveling out garden soil so that the flowers we plant grow evenly and well. Here, the aim is to curb our habitual tendency to define our interactions with others in terms of self-referential categories of friends, foes, and strangers. The second practice is about developing, as it were, a gut-level recognition of the fundamental equality of self and others as human beings, who aspire to happiness and wish to avoid suffering. In the first of these practices, we again employ discursive thought processes. Although it is normal to feel close to our loved ones, negative toward those who wish us harm, and indifferent toward strangers, too often we create unnecessary problems and suffering for ourselves and for others by clinging to these categories excessively for self-regarding reasons. As discussed earlier, this is the root of our tendency to relate to others in terms of us and them. So cultivating greater equanimity with respect to others is extremely helpful, especially as an aid to living in an ethical life. To do this, you once again begin by relaxing and settling the mind through a breathing exercise, and then proceed as follows. Call up an image of a small group of people you like, such as some of your close friends and relatives. Establish this image in as much detail and with as much verisimilitude as you can. Verisimilitude. Yeah, just wanted to make sure I said that right. Never heard that word. As you can. Then add an image next to it of a group of people toward whom you feel indifferent, such as people you see at work or just out shopping, but you don't know them well. Again, try to make this image as real and detailed as possible. Finally, call up a third image, this one of a group of people you dislike or with whom you are in conflict, or whose views you strongly disagree with. And again, establish it as clearly and in as much detail as you can. Having created images of these three groups of people in your mind, you then allow your normal mental reactions toward them to arise. Notice your thoughts and feelings toward each group in turn. You will find that your natural tendency is to feel attachment toward the first, indifferent toward the second, and hostility toward the third. Recognizing this, you next turn to examining your own mind and considering how each of these three responses affects you. You will find that your feelings toward members of the first group are pleasurable, inspiring a certain confidence and strength, coupled with a desire to alleviate or prevent their suffering. Toward the second group, you will notice that your feelings do not excite you or inspire any particular thoughts or concerns at all. Toward the third group, however, the feelings you have will excite your mind in negative directions. The next step is to engage in contemplation, using your critical faculty. The people we consider our enemies today may not remain so, and this is also true of friends. Furthermore, sometimes our feelings toward friends, such as attachment, can lead to problems for us, while sometimes our interactions with enemies can benefit us, perhaps by making us stronger and more alert. Contemplating such complexities can lead you to reflect on the futility of relating to others in an extreme manner, whether they are members of the third group or even the first. Once you see that this way of relating to others impedes your ability to develop goodwill toward them and has a negative impact on your peace of mind, you then try to lessen the strength of your extreme feelings. Over time, the aim is to be able to relate to others, not as friends or foes according to your divisive classification of them, but as fellow human beings whose fundamental equality with yourself you recognize. As for the second form of equanimity practice, many of the points already discussed in Chapter 2, the chapter on our common humanity, can be brought into our mental cultivation here. The key points are two simple truths, that just as I myself have an instinctive and legitimate desire to be happy and to avoid suffering, so do all other people, and that just as I have the right to fulfill these innate aspirations, so do they. Reflecting on these points, we can then ask ourselves, on what grounds do we discriminate so powerfully between ourselves and others? If we repeat this exercise over and over, not just one or two practice sessions, but over the course of weeks, months, and even years, we will gradually find that we are able to generate true inner equanimity based on a profound recognition of humanity's shared innate aspiration to happiness and dislike of suffering. And I think this is the last, let's see. I'm just trying to see if that's kind of, oh, here's the one more exercise. So rejoicing in the example of others. Okay. Another exercise which can be very helpful in cultivating beneficial states of mind is a discursive practice taking as its object the good example of a person we greatly admire. This is similar in some ways to using role models as a means of inspiring ourselves. For those coming from a secular background, this can be someone past or present whom we especially admire for his or her compassion and selflessness. Perhaps a doctor, a nurse, a teacher, or a scientist. For those of religious faith, it might be the founder of our religious tradition or some saint from its history. By reflecting on the admired person's life, contemplating how he or she lives or lived for others, how his or her behavior is or was characterized by compassion, we familiarize ourselves with their example. One of the aims of this type of analytic mental training is to gain a direct appreciation of a given quality. In this case, we analyze what motivates people to devote themselves to others. Having identified this quality, we can then focus on it and rest our mind on it as a way to unite ourselves with the quality through direct, intuitive insight into the compassionate motivation that is the ultimate object of this exercise. In other words, the idea is to train ourselves to act in our daily lives as the person we admire would act, so that when, for example, we become aware of others' suffering, we feel disposed to respond as this person would respond. We are thus seeking first to change our attitude toward others and then to change our behavior. This, after all, is the whole point of our practice, to inform and affect our actions. If it does not, then there is not much point to it. Okay, so I think that covers most of the exercises, and I think what we'll talk about next is just the other things that can follow once you start practicing something like that, like dealing with afflictive attitudes and emotions, obstacles to good mental health or mental cultivation practice, things that can get in the way, our progress, the joy of mental training, the impact it has on our daily life. And that looks like that's about it. So we will stop right there and we will pick up on this sort of next subject in this section of the Meditation as Mental Cultivation chapter. All right, so we are almost done with the book. Just one more video to go. If I'm being honest, this has not been my favorite book simply because it is very difficult to read and there's so much detail where I don't really know if there needs to be quite so much. Maybe I'm just not a detail-oriented person in that area, but summing up many of the things for me would probably be a little more helpful or just really hit the point the same way, but it may work for another person. So that's why, as I've said in previous videos, just because I'm reading the book does not mean I agree with everything that the author says, that I resonate with every single thing. I'm reading the book 99% of the time for the first time as I read it to you. And yes, I do read a little bit ahead sometimes, or I'll read what I'm going to read so that I can have an idea. But it's not in the same sense. I'm not taking it in the way that I would if I'm just reading it to read it and take in information. I'm more just reading the words to see what I'll stumble on if there's something I don't understand. This book has proven to be a bit of a challenge. So if it's been a challenge for you as well, I totally understand that. But yet I do gain something from every book that I read. And I'm always trying to better myself, work on myself, and then share it with others, because that's what we need more of, is sharing the goodness in the world and learning something good and helpful for ourselves, because that's the only person that we can, at the end of the day, really help and really change if we want to see that. So anyways, until next time, please take care of yourself. Please take care of those around you. I'll see you for the very last video on this book. And yeah, I'll see you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.